It being 6:30, I'll call to order the meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education. It's Monday, February 25th, 2019. We're at the Oregon School District Innovation Center. Could you call the roll?
Ms. Feeney?
Present.
Ms. Oderico?
Here.
Ms. Flanagan?
Here.
Mr. Pankratz?
Present.
Mr. Kraus? Mr. LeBrun?
Here.
Mr. Zock?
Present. Board has a quorum. I have proof that the meeting has been appropriately noticed pursuant to Wisconsin Open Meetings Law. Our agenda tonight, we have our usual introductory sections, and then we have two action items. Both are public hearings and decisions with respect to two boundary petitions that have been filed with the district, one with respect to a property over near our McFarland area and the other with respect to Swan Creek. We have discussion items principally on that as an equity report, and then an informational item of 5-year budget plan, superintendent's report, and then we will be going into closed session and not returning to open session after that. I would need to entertain a motion to approve the agenda as posted. Is there a second? Mr. LeBrun with the second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Of a motion. Consent calendar, number A. Is there any item on the consent calendar that any board member wishes to remove? Okay, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar. I note that you have at your desk staffing assignments, two retirements. There, one is Kathy Doyle Horney and the other Colleen Christensen, both really long-term teachers, both who I grew up with in the Oregon area, and tells you how old I'm getting when our friends are retiring, and we're going to miss them a lot. They are both excellent educators. So I'd entertain a motion to approve the items on the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and I'd also note that we've got a number of donations. The Draper family, Irene, Carla, and Dwayne, have donated a significant amount of money for the Draper Family Scholarship, and I'll note that their husband and father, Manly Draper, was a longtime Oregon school board member back in the 60s and the 70s. So we appreciate them for their scholarship. And then a number of splash pad donations, including a couple from the Jonans and from the Oregon Daycare, with a large contribution of over $4,000 for the splash pad. Eric Ross, $400 for the splash pad, and then an anonymous donation of $200 for families in need at Prairie View. So we thank all those folks for the donations. And with that, could you call the roll? We've got some resignations for retirements.
Mr. Pankratz? Ms. Feeney? Ms. Oderico? Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Kraus?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Zock?
Yes. Items on the consent calendar are approved by unanimous vote. Item B on the agenda is communication from the public. Board Policy 180.04 has established a time and an opportunity for a community to address the board. Has anybody signed in, Katie, that you know of? Is there anyone from outside of the public hearings for the land? Is there anybody here to address the board? Is there anyone to address the board? Okay. We'll move on to item C, informational items, OEA report, and I don't see anyone tonight. And I don't see Becken. I saw her yesterday. I will touch base with her. That takes us, at this point in time, we're going to action items D, and these are our public hearings. So I'm going to recess our board meeting at 8:34 and commence our public hearings at that time. So as chairs of the meeting, I call the meeting to order for the first public hearing related to the petition to detach from the Oregon School District and attach to the McFarland School District from the petition of Andrew and Natalie. Is it Hoyos? Did I get it? Good. 5972 Oak Hollow Drive in McFarland. And that property is described in our agendas. I'm recommending that Gina Jonan serve as a secretary for the hearing. You agreeable to that? Well, I need the motion to that. Motion to entertain Gina as secretary of the public hearing on the detachment.
I move. Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You are appointed secretary, Gina. Okay, unless there's an objection from the floor, the notice of hearing will not be read by the clerk. Is there any objection to not reading? Didn't think so. Outlined in the agenda for the public hearing is the statutory basis for making the decision, and that the school board shall consider and weigh the following factors as they affect the educational welfare of all the children of the district affected by the reorganization, the geographical and topical characteristics of the effective school district, including the estimated time of travel to and from the school of pupils in the districts, the educational needs of all children residing in the districts, the educational programs currently offered by each district, and the ability and commitment of each district to meet those needs and to continue those educational programs. Criteria C is territory is proposed to be detached from one school district and attached to an adjoining district, whether the proposed attachment will have any adverse effect on the program currently offered by the school district from which the territory is proposed to be detached, including both curricular and extracurricular aspects of that program. The testimony of written statements filed by the residents of the affected school district, the estimated fiscal effect of the proposed reorganization on the affected school districts, including the effect of the apportionment of assets and liabilities, whether the proposed reorganization will make any part of the school district's territory non-contiguous, the socioeconomic level and racial compensation of the pupils who reside or will reside in the territory proposed to be detached from one district and attached to an adjoining school district or in a school district proposed to be dissolved, the proportion of students who reside in such territory who are children at risk as defined by statute, and the effect that the pupils described in this paragraph will have on the present and future socioeconomic level and racial compensation of the effective districts and the proportion of the district's enrollments that will be children at risk. Okay, and the board may consider and weigh other appropriate factors as needed. At this time, I'm going to ask Dr. Bussler to review the petition to provide a common background of the development and issues for the board at that point in time.
Okay. This is the first, my first set of comments about the petition. Board members, I'd refer you to either the electronic or the purple paper report that we've provided. And the purple report is 2 pages in length. Pages 3 through 5 are summarizes the chairperson's agenda for our public hearing tonight. Page 7 is the actual petition that was filed by the Hoyois family. Petition to alter school district boundaries. You'll notice when you review this particular petition, it is a 28-acre parcel, and having some background information with the town of Dunn, that is for a single development. That is not for a multiple development. It would be for just one residence. Page 8 is the small territory transfer. If there's reasons for a signature, because it's only one family, that's blank. Page 9 is a map that Katie put together for us, and I only have 7 copies of these because we went so fast through this first portion, so this is just for board members. And I was having a conversation with Steve earlier this morning, and that's why Katie and I developed the map. Neither one of us are cartographers, so you will notice this is not the fanciest map in the world. And the slash marks, you'll notice the property in question, which is an L-shaped property. Then on the upper right-hand corner is Burmeister Woods. Some of you may recall that we had a petition from Burmeister Woods. It's actually split almost in half, where a portion of it is in the McFarland School District and then a portion in the Oregon School District. And I provided northwest, south, and east on this particular map just to give you an additional framework lens on page number 9. Page number 10 is information from Access Dane County, as well as page number 11 with an aerial, what I'll call a Google Maps view. Page number 12 is the final information from Dane County Land Information Office. Page 13 is the resolution that the board will act on at the end of tonight's hearing, and it's authorizing issuance of an order by the Oregon School District, and we prepared it for Krista since she is the school board clerk. Pages 14 through 20 is information from the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction that outlines, in a general way, the school district boundary appeal board, which oftentimes petitions to attach or detach result at the school district boundary appeal board level, and then we are called upon to testify at those hearings. Page number 21 through page number 33 is chapter 117 of Wisconsin state law on school district reorganization. So that is the background information that we typically provide to the board for your consideration during the hearing, and there's a section where you will come back to me and I will review the criteria, but that is item number 13. So I will stop with the background information and see if any of you have questions.
What did you suggest the slash mark area was?
Oh, the slash mark area is the McFarland School District.
So do I understand that the right-hand part of the rectangle that is Birdmeister Woods is Oregon?
Correct.
And that's contiguous, all of the property around it is also Oregon? To the east of that? North, east, and south? Or is it an island within?
Burmeister Woods is not an island, so I just gave you this non-cartographer map to give you a sense of the proximity of the property being requested to being detached to Burmeister Woods. It shows nothing more than that.
Okay.
It would likely make more sense if you would have listened to Steve's conversation that he and I had early this morning when he asked me, how close is this to Burmeister Woods? And I thought I'd provide this as a bit of a framework for that if I didn't explain that better the first time.
Yeah, to the south of Burmeister Woods, that's Oregon. I don't know about east, but I know.
No, I'm not looking at the other graphic.
Yeah, if you coordinate it with page 9.
Yep.
Okay. Having that overview, then we're going to move into the comment portion of that, and this is informal, but we're going to record the information presented, and then people who are coming to provide us with information will come to the desk before us and speak into the microphone and state name and address in the school district. We're going to hear from the proponents first, and then the opponents, and then having an opportunity for rebuttals after that. So proponents of the petition, and I know Andrew Hoyos is here. So Andrew, if you want to come up to the table here. Gina, could you see if the mic's on for Andrew? Yeah. We'll do a drum roll.
Just talk and do it if that's okay.
Great. And if you could first state your name, address, and school district, and then the floor is yours.
Yep. My name is Andrew Hoyos. I live at 5972 Oak Hollow in McFarland, member of the McFarland School District currently.
Okay, great. Floor is yours.
So we, my wife Natalie and I purchased this plot of land in the town of Dunn, and it is part of the Oregon School District currently. We currently have 2 girls that are enrolled in the McFarland School District who are ages 9 and 7. And we do plan to build a single-family house on this parcel within the next 3 to 5 years. Obviously, we'd like to keep our kids in the same school district if possible. Obviously, we have nothing against the Oregon School District. I think it's wonderful. But would really like to keep our kids in the same program that they're in right now. That parcel will, as you mentioned, is only for a single-family home. Part of a rezone we're doing, it will be deed restricted, so only one home could be built there. Right now, the northern border of that parcel is the McFarland School District. So it would not create any non-contiguous lines with that zone. It'd really just kind of be a dip down and up. So I think that was really all the information I wanted to share. But
Great. Does any board member have any question for Mr. Hoyos? Dan?
My name is Dan Kraus. Have we seen this petition before? Have you brought this to our attention before?
No, this is the first time.
Okay. Where is your current residence related to this? Is it contiguous?
Our current residence is in McFarland proper.
So is it really close to here, or is it somewhere else?
No, we're in like downtown McFarland.
Oh, okay.
So not
Gotcha.
in the town of Dunn at all currently.
And is the property currently restricted to one?
It's zoned RH4, so a part of that zoning is only one single family house as well.
Per
It's not-
how many acres, or?
It's just that entire, it's one parcel. It's zoned RH4, so only one house can be built on it currently. That's not a restriction in the deed. That's going through the process right now. So the current zoning says that only one house can be built. Obviously, you could apply to have it rezoned. What we're going through is a deed restriction that the town of Dunn wants on that property that will be part of the deed, so only one house could be built, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Any other board member have any questions? Tim?
Do you know what the current situation is with McFarland and school choice? Whether you could, if you built there, could you petition back to McFarland, and would there be space for you?
As far as like open enrollment?
Yes.
There is no open enrollment spaces in McFarland right now.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Are there any other proponents of the petition present? Okay. Are there any opponents to the petition? Okay. Seeing none, at this time I'm going to close the public presentation and open it up for board deliberations. The only information presented hereafter will be on the request of board members concerning the information received by them or brought out in this meeting. Are there any questions or information that any board member would like answered or clarified at this time? Okay. Each board member that would like to state their thoughts on this petition may do so, or we can do that after we hear from Dr. Bussler on the alternatives and explain them and the criteria. Why don't you go through that, Brian, first?
Board members, there are 6 criteria that are part of state law, actually 7 criteria that are part of state law. The first criteria is identified as the geographic and typographical characteristics of the affected school district, including the estimated travel time to and from school for pupils in the school district. The proposed reorganization is located on Mahoney Road within the Oregon School District. The northern border of the property is next to or adjacent to the McFarland School District. When we did a review of miles to and from the district, to the center of Oregon it's 5.6 miles. To the center of McFarland it is 4.6 miles. And again, a map of the situation is, or the map of the property in question is page 9, and then also the non-cartography map that I provided to you, which indicates where this property is in relation to Burmeister Woods. In terms of the second criteria, it relates to the educational needs of all children residing in the affected school districts, the educational programs currently offered by each affected school district, and the ability and commitment of each school district to meet those needs and continue to offer those educational programs. Obviously, the Oregon School District can meet the needs of children residing on this property, even though there are no children right now. Both of our school districts, when you look at the state report cards, we are in the category of meets or exceeds expectation. The score in McFarland is 78.1. The score in Madison on our district, or Madison on the Oregon School District, is 78.7. So our score is higher than Madison's, but still within that range of exceeds McFarland. Thank you. but still exceeds expectations. On the third factor, if the territory is proposed to be detached from one school district and attached to an adjoining school district, whether the proposed detachment will have any adverse effect on the program currently offered by the school district from which the territory is proposed to be attached, including both curricular and extracurricular aspects of the program. Since this is a 28-acre parcel, and my understanding is it would be limited to one family, a typical family of three would result in a $30,000 budget capacity based on the current state funding formula. Since budget capacity is a function of supporting the district's overall budget, there is an adverse effect with having less funds to support the overall district budget. The fourth criteria is the testimony or written statements filed by the residents of the affected school district. That's already in the record. The fifth criteria, the estimated financial effect of the proposed reorganization of the affected school districts, including the effect of the apportionment of assets and liabilities. The fiscal effect have two dimensions. First, the budget capacity question, which relates to approximately $10,000 worth of funding with the budget formula. And then secondarily, the property tax portion, a property valued at the average Oregon school district residential rate of $250,000. So a $250,000 home would yield a property tax of $2,845. This is based on the mill rate, this year's mill rate, the 2018 mill rate of $11.38. We're not sure the value of the home that the family will build, but just to give you a metric, if it's valued similar to the average home in the Oregon School District, it's $28,845. That's $250,000. If it were double that, or $500,000, that would be $5,690. Obviously, any property taxes that are not paid from one particular home it spills over to all of the other property taxes within the community. Item number 6, which is whether the proposed reorganization will make any part of a school district's territory non-contiguous. As you can see on map 9 and the additional map that we provided, this property is contiguous. It would not create an island in the Oregon School District. And then lastly, on number 7, I won't read all of this. This is the socioeconomic level and racial compensation or composition of the pupils who reside or will reside in the territory proposed to be detached. A little background about the McFarland School District. As I looked at their Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction report card, their current enrollment is 2,452, while Oregon's current enrollment is 4,100. So obviously we are a larger district. In terms of the socioeconomic and racial composition, it's really difficult to get the socioeconomic level of the various school districts, but we do have a distribution of race and ethnicity as collected by the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. In McFarland is 85.5% white race on their DPI report card. Oregon is 87.5 white race on the Department of Public Instruction report card. That concludes a review of the factors, and if you have any questions, I am happy to respond and answer your questions.
Any questions of Brian on the review of the factors? Troy?
Dr. Bussler, on item number 3, you mentioned an adverse effect on the programming of $30,000. Could you just review that for me again?
Sure. The question talks about, or this factor addresses, would there be an adverse effect on the program? The way that we can quantify that adverse effect is to look at it from a budget capacity standpoint. If there were hypothetically 3 children residing in that property, and they are detached, the property is detached from the Oregon School District and sent to the McFarland School District, each child creates budget capacity, and I really dislike thinking of children and young people as budget capacity, but the way the state formula is set up, that's how it's calculated. That would result in $30,000 of budget capacity that Oregon would lose and McFarland would gain. Now that I know the family has 2 children, I would modify that to $20,000 because each child, again, the way the state assigns budget capacity, McFarland would gain, if detached, $20,000 to their budget. Oregon would be reduced by $20,000. I know the family is currently in McFarland and not counted in our budget capacity, but that's the financial effect on that.
Krista.
So I want to dig deeper a little bit into that. So really the cost to us would be the loss of the $2,800 in terms of tax value. I understand what you're saying about the $30,000 or $20,000. Mm-hmm. That could potentially be filled by open enrollment, we don't have the cost of educating those children, mm-hmm. but the true loss would really be the tax revenue of the land. Is that correct or not?
I would say it's both. Only because when we're talking about a small number of students, it's not like we would reduce a program. It's really not a marginal cost. We still would, in this situation, lose $20,000 of state support. But your secondary point, again, assuming the family builds a home of the average value, that property tax rate or that property tax payment to the district would go down by $2,845, commensurate with the value of the home. And then that gets shifted to everyone else in the tax community because there's no other way to make those funds up.
Any other questions? Okay, now's an opportunity for each board member, if they wanted, to state their thoughts on the petition before we move into the decision process. Not seeing anything. Brian, could you review the alternatives then for us?
Yes, on the purple report that you have in front of the board, you really have two choices. Choice number 1 is to adopt a resolution that accepts the detachment of the property from the Oregon School District to the McFarland School District. I can tell you because the McFarland School District was kind enough to send us an email. They have already taken action on this, and the McFarland School District has accepted the attachment to their district. Your second choice, the other choice, is for the board to deny the detachment from the Oregon School District. And the administrative recommendation on page 2 of the purple report, the administrative recommendation is to deny the detachment from the Oregon School District and attachment to the McFarland School District. If the recommendation is approved, the clerk shall send a certified copy of the resolution to the McFarland School Board and to DPI, the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, within 5 days after the adoption. And then that process, often it likely continues to the school board, a boundary appeal board. And the resolution that the board would be acting on is on page 13 of your packet. And it has been legally prepared, so it's all set for you to make the choice.
And just to clarify that, if the board were to follow the recommendation of denial, Mr. Hoyos could petition to the Boundary Appeal Board, and then they would, it's a 3-person board, who would review the facts and make an independent decision about whether or not to detach or attack or deny the petition.
Yes, if you're not familiar with that, it's 3 board members from across the state, and the way the board is set up, 1 board member is from a small district, 1 board member is from a medium-sized district, 1 board member is from a large district. And Department of Public Instruction official schedules that hearing, invites the family that's wishing the detachment, also invites both school districts to attend, and I've honestly lost count how many times I have attended the School District Boundary Appeal Board, and Andy has always joined me at those hearings. There have been times when we've secured legal counsel to join the 2 of us, and there have been times where we have gone on our own. I would suspect that now that Gina is on board with us, I don't think, Gina, we have done one together. So it's been a few years. Gina, Andy, and I would attend the hearing on behalf of the board.
Courtney?
Is it your understanding, Brian, that this property has always been part of the Oregon School District?
Yes, that my understanding. It's always been part of our district.
And as part of background, I think the thinking over the long term of the board when we're faced with these detachment petitions is to deny them based on the loss of revenue from both the student and the property value, knowing that that then goes up to the Board of Appeals, which basically makes the decision. But rather than have the board make the decision to lose tax base, that gets thrown into another appeal process. So that's typically been the history. And I think part of the administrative recommendation is that loss of tax base.
Yes, that is correct. And I also know it's slightly uncomfortable for all of us to talk about not being able to honor the request for attachment. But that is part of the process that we have, and we certainly have no ill will toward the family making the detachment request, and we'll just follow through in the process like we have done in the past.
Any other comments or questions? Dan?
This time I'd like to move to deny the transfer of territory described in the petition, that the reorganization requested in the petition filed January 29th, 2019, detaching territory in said petition from the Oregon School District and attaching it to the McFarland School District to be denied, and that such petition be dismissed.
Is there a second to that motion? Ms. Beanie with the second. Okay, at this point in time then, we have a motion and a second, and we will now do the vote by ballot. So Gina, do you have the ballots? Katie is going to shoot them around. And just so everyone's clear, the motion is to deny the petition. So if you're in favor of that motion, you put yes. If you're not, it's a no.
Okay. The motion is approved 7-0.
Which means that the petition to transfer the territory to the McFarland School District has been denied, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I think that's all we need to do at this point in time, right, Gina? Other
Correct.
than adjourn the hearing at 7:04 regarding that petition. Thank you, Mr. Hoyles. for attending. And the hearing on that petition was concluded at 7:04. Hi, Becken.
Hi.
I'll circle back to you. We're recessed of a regular meeting, but I'll get you when we do comments, okay? Okay. That's good. All right, public hearing number 2, I'm going to call that to order at 7:05. And again, I'm Steve Zock, the president of the board, and will chair this meeting. I need a motion to recommend Gina Jonan serve as the secretary of the meeting, or the public hearing. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Gina, you're secretary again. And if you would let the record know what members are present for our public hearing. Unless there's objection from the floor, the notice of hearing will not be read by the clerk. Seeing no objection, we're not going to read the notice of hearing. Number 5 is statutory basis for making the decision. There are 6 factors, and unless there's an objection, I don't think you want to hear my raspy voice one more time reading through those, but we'll put in the record the fact that the board has before them the 7 criteria that will play into our decision making tonight. At this point in time, I'm going to ask Brian to, and also that the board can consider and weigh other appropriate factors. Brian, would you provide an overview of the petition with respect to Swan Creek?
Yes, board members, on the cover sheet, you have a petition that was, the petitioner names are Jason and Kimber Strauss and Pamela and Tony Wood. And this included a significant amount of signatures that, to our knowledge, meet the requirement and are all accurate. The school district where the territory is located is the Madison School District. The municipality is the city of Fitchburg. The county is Dane. The value of the property in 2018 is $185 million, and it is at 100% assessment ratio. I also have some information that was provided to us by the petitioners. In 2017, in the neighborhood there were 90 students enrolled in the Madison Metropolitan School District, 50 students open enrolled, and 20 students in private school. In 2018, there were 71 students enrolled in Madison, 60 open enrolled, and 20 students in private home school. Swan Creek neighborhood had been in the Oregon School District since 1958. Included in the packet of information is a multiple-page boundary agreement that was approved by the Oregon School District Board and the Madison School District Board on August 26, 2002. That concludes my orientation on the Swan Creek petition.
And we will hear from you after we open up the hearing for public comment. At this point in time, I'm going to invite proponents of the petition and opponents to the petition to come forward. First the proponents and then the opponents to provide testimony to the board. Is there anyone present who's a proponent of the petition, that is to detach Swan Creek from the Madison School District and attach it to the Oregon School District? Are any of the proponents here? Okay, seeing none, are there any opponents to the petition present this evening? I see none. All right, at that time, I'm going to close the public presentation and open it up for school board deliberations. I think Dr. Bussler, I'll have you provide alternatives and explain them, and then give the board at that point in time a chance to discuss the matter.
Sure, I will start with, I believe, based on the Advice of counsel, the boundary agreement dated August 26, 2002 between the Oregon School District and the Madison Metropolitan School District prevents us from commenting on the boundary factors contained in Wisconsin state law. I'll point out a provision. The Oregon School District and Madison School District agreed in Section 7 of the August 26, 2002 boundary agreement not to contest boundaries, and I will read into the record this provision. Upon the adoption by the Madison Metropolitan School District and Oregon School District of their respective resolutions referenced in paragraph 1 and paragraph 2 of this agreement, the parties agree that they will not take any action to contest or challenge before the School District Boundary Appeal Board or any agency, court, or tribunal, or to support, assist, aid, or encourage any person or entity to contest, appeal, or challenge any reorganization order or resolution adopted pursuant to this agreement. In terms of the board's choices, again, there are really two choices, and if we look at page 13, the authorizing issuance of an order, your choice is to approve detachment or to deny detachment or attachment. Our recommendation, based on the agreement and advice of counsel, is to deny the request for attachment. I'm welcome to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions of Brian? Okay. Any thoughts on the petition for the board member? Seeing none. Tim? Dan?
I want to make clear that I did receive dozens of emails, both supporting and opposing this petition. It seems unfortunate that the regular meetings of our school boards in Madison and here seem to coincide today, so that apparently, though I don't know, the people who are interested in this and wanted to appear at a hearing chose Madison to go to instead of Oregon, and I don't know why that would be, but we can all guess. It should not be a reflection, though, I don't think, of the lack of interest for the people in this particular neighborhood as to whether or not they want this to go through, as evidenced by their emailing campaign that I experienced, and I do believe the rest of the board and administration also received those many emails, both supporting, mostly supporting, and also many emails asking for denial of this petition. But I did not do an exact count, but I would say I probably got 3 or 4 supports to every request for denial in my inbox. Like I say, I think it's unfortunate that we're meeting at the same time the Madison Metropolitan School District is meeting, and I think that the board should not consider that as lack of interest by the people who are making the petition or opposing it. Having said that, though, I do have some reservations about whether the contract or agreement made in 2002 should bind us. I believe that we should, at this point, not pick a fight with the Madison Metropolitan School District over the validity of that contract, and I think we should follow what was written and, at this time, deny the petition.
Thanks, Dan. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, Brian, could you review the motions, potential motions again?
Yes. I have a lot of paper here. The administrative recommendation is to deny the attachment from the Madison School District and attach to the Oregon School District. If approved, the clerk shall send a certified copy of the resolution to the Madison Metropolitan School District and to the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction within 5 days after the adoption.
Okay. My comment is that I think we ought to follow a legal advice with respect to the agreement that had been entered into between the Madison Metropolitan School District and the Oregon School District and deny the petition based on that ground alone. Knowing that a denial of the petition then sets in the process an appeal situation where issues related to this get taken up by a different board. So that's my thought.
And board members, I forgot to mention, if you're following electronically, that is page 76 of the packet.
Okay, at this time, Courtney.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make note of the fact that I saw somewhere in one of the packages, or perhaps it was one of the emails, and just remind folks that all of the population projections that were done by MD Roffers did not include Swan Creek or even the potential of Swan Creek to come back into the Oregon School District. So any growth that we talk about does not include Swan Creek. So just wanted to make that clarification in case there was some speculation about whether we had included them in our projections or not.
I'd entertain a motion at this point.
I will move to deny the request to attach the Swan Creek neighborhood to the Oregon School District.
We have a motion to deny the request. Is there a second?
Second.
Second on the table. Katie, would you pass out the ballots? Got them here. And then a yes vote means denial of the petition to detach from Madison and move to Oregon. A no means the opposite. So the motion is to deny. Okay, the petition to detach Swan Creek from the Madison Metropolitan School District to the Oregon School District is denied by the Oregon Board on a 7-0 fight. And at this vote, at this time, I'm going to close the session, a public hearing at 7:19 p.m. And I will call back into order our regular agenda of the regular board meeting. Discussion items E, committee reports, policy, anything? Visioning? All right, that takes us to our reports. Equity report. And who's going to present? Got Candace and Leslie. And Shannon. So when you guys are all set up, take it away.
Does Andy have us?
He's pulling it up. I see his face here. He's got it. We're going to be asking Jim to join us in Good. Thank you. So Candace and I will kind of toss the ball back and forth, and Shannon has some things she'd like to share with you too, bringing her perspective as a building principal. And I'm going to have Candace start us off.
So the last time we were here, I think, was in August, and we had laid out some next steps that we wanted to take as an equity process in our own learning and in the district leadership teams. So what you see there is a list of the things that we said we would do as next steps. And we know that we have a lot of work yet to do in equity, but we have taken steps in each of these areas. So this is what you're going to hear about tonight. Are you controlling or is Andy?
Andy is.
So the first thing that was on the list before was that we would continue as an administrative team in our learning and working together, learning from each other and learning with the National Equity Project. And we had recently a day where we had Heidi Gill from the National Equity Project with us, and she spent the morning with our administrative team as a whole, and then she had appointments with the buildings in the afternoon so that they could each work on their own leadership teams and their next steps as a building. And what you have on the screen there are some of the takeaways that we had from that day with Heidi. And one of the first things on there is the emphasis on how we want to continue to support our students and the relationships that we have with them. One of the examples that I can share with you tonight is from Brooklyn. Carrie and her team at Brooklyn have identified 65 students who were either from groups that are traditionally marginalized or were identified through a sociogram to participate in this relationship building activity that they have. And that involves each staff member having 3 students that they are going to spend particular time with and make sure that they have connections with. So they're in that process of working with that group of 65 students, and they're going to soon be able to tell us the impact of that relationship building. We also are making an emphasis across the district in terms of making sure that we're hearing our student voices. As you know, that's more impactful than most of the things that we do probably, is to hear from our students and what our actions mean to them. We're also working to partner with a parent group so that we can make sure that we hear their voices as well. One of the things that we talked about is making sure that we are looking at the impact of our decisions and our activities. So we often think about that our intentions were good, our intentions were positive, and that's, I think, for the most part true. But our impact, the impact of our decisions, is not always the same as our intent. So we want to make a concentrated effort on making sure that we're looking also at the impact of our activities and our policies. And then just as a final thought on the relationships and routines, we have been doing a lot with social emotional learning, trauma-informed schools, all of those kinds of things as relationship building, as well as the work with equity. And we want to make sure that our staff also know that the routines of a classroom also are helpful to students and make them feel more comfortable. And that's one of the things that we kind of walked away with as a reminder from our Equity Day.
Thank you. I'm going to move this over a little bit because eventually I'd like Shannon to be able to talk just a bit too. Related to our work with Heidi Gill and the emphasis on relationships, I think one of the big components, and this relates to everything else we'll be talking about too, is not just the importance of relationships, but systems that support the relationships, so that the relationships aren't left completely up to chance, but there are systems in place that build it. And I think that's a really important piece to remember as we're thinking about what more we can do within our school district to ensure all of our students feel included and cared for and represented. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about in August was the idea of widening our aperture. And that's a phrase used by Zaretta Hammond in her book, Culturally Responsive Practices and the Brain. And it's about the idea of being able to step back and take a wider view of situations so that you are not looking in a narrow, focused way and seeing things perhaps through your unconscious bias, but to take a look back and look at things in a broader picture. And I think when we're talking about being able to widen our aperture, we're talking about a lot of different work. And one of the big pieces that I wanted to mention is the curriculum work that still needs to be done. Our library media directors have worked very hard to ensure that we have an inclusive selection of literature in our library. And we are also now working on our classroom libraries. Our middle school English language arts teachers, and followed by our Rome Corners language arts teachers. We're having an infusion of funds for the teachers to work in partnership with the library media director to add books to their library with the goal of creating an inclusive library so that students will always be able to see and put their hands on books that have characters that are like them or have authors that are like them. So our students will all have that opportunity. I think another big curriculum-related piece is our upcoming social studies work. But it's not all on, all of this is not on the shoulders of social studies. I think no matter what curriculum we're working on, we have to be asking whose voices are represented and whose voices are not here. And how do we ensure that who is not represented becomes a part of the process, either through materials or inviting people in or just finding ways to ensure that there are many voices represented in whether it's the literature we read or the history we study. And a key piece to that will be the teaching tolerance anti-bias standards, and we've had a couple of sessions the past 2 summers with a trainer related to that, but I think it'll be even more important as we continue with our social studies standards adoption. Another key piece to this widening our aperture is making sure that we really do widen it and we don't just stop at holidays, because a lot of times schools or organizations feel they're being very inclusive when they celebrate a lot of different holidays or when they acknowledge that sort of thing. And one of the things we've spoken about is that when you're trying to create trust, a sense of trust, this is all coming from Zaretta Hammond's work, it's important to go beyond the superficial into the deeper components of what culture is. And Shannon's equity leadership team made actually an amazing video that we have embedded in the equity presentation that we will send to all of you so that you can watch it. But it's students sharing different aspects of their culture, from the shallow and the, no, you remember the 3 layers. Will you please enlighten us?
No, I'm going to forget what they are. But Zaretta talks about how there's like 3 layers of culture, and a lot of the times we think about like, oh, in my family I make Christmas cookies. That's more like the more surface type of culture, and that's where we tend to naturally focus when we think about, you know, clothing and customs and those types of things. But she talks about sort of deeper culture, like how does your family value time? Is it important to be on time or not be on time? And what does time mean to your family? Or how close do you stand next to someone when you talk to them? And then the really deep culture is looking at like, what do you believe about spirituality? What's your faith? What's your view of nature and how we fit into it? So like really big sort of worldview things. And so we had our students with our equity team members and talked to kids about this. And I think it was really helpful because, as you'll see in the video, it helped our teachers to kind of hear more about all the kids who come into our school every day and sort of hear their voice and perspective. And I think most of the staffs have done these 3 levels, but then now to hear our kids' voices in the mix was a sort of our next step with widening that aperture that Leslie was talking about.
But it's a 24-minute video, so it wasn't appropriate for tonight. However, I do think you will enjoy watching it. And then the next thing that we said last August we would do is that we would have some training and include our non-certified staff. So we did. In August, we had a training with paraprofessionals, bus drivers, food service, custodians. This room was filled from side to side. It was a very crowded room that day. And we had Percy Brown and Rainey Briggs from Critical Consciousness, LLC, come and do the one-day training. And that is never a one-time thing. It is something that we will need to continue with and build upon. And I know that some of our schools have done some things with our paraprofessionals related to the same sort of training that's happening at the in-services with the teachers, ensuring that there is a component of that that's happening with our paraprofessional staff too. The next one, please. And then we get to some really great stuff that has been happening, in particular what we've been able to do related to engaging students. We've had 2 panels thus far with students from the high school, one in August and one in January. And I would really love it if Jim would just come up and share some of the highlights from that, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you. So we worked with Percy Brown and Rainey Briggs towards the Institute for Critical Consciousness, and one of the huge things is helping kids. The only way that we can, as a majority white faculty, understand our students' experiences, we have to help them find their voices and become leaders. And so we had a great opportunity to bring Percy and Rainey in to work with our MSU, our Minority Student Union, and really prepare them for, we had on January 21st on our PD day, we had just a really powerful experience in which we had a group of students, and there's a small picture there on the screen of students in a fishbowl discussion speaking about their lived experience here in the high school, the things where they find allies amongst staff and students that have made a difference, as well as their struggles, their very real struggles, and the struggles that they've experienced here. And it was very powerful. It was the feedback form from staff indicated that was really a telling experience, and our staff is really motivated to continue to support our kids. Afterwards, the group, as they invited, if anybody in this room wants to continue the conversation, we're happy to extend, and so don't be afraid to reach out to us. And so that happened in a smaller group in August with one of our institutes in the summer PD, and we brought that to our entire faculty here at the high school, and it was a really powerful experience along the way.
I think this also relates to one of the things we spoke about last August, and that was determining how we will measure whether or not we're making progress. And I think that we will certainly have traditional measures related to students and academic achievement, but I think that perhaps our real measure of progress will be the student experience and how they express it to us over the course of time. Because the students were very clearly saying, well, there was much said that was positive, but they very clearly said they did not see themselves in our curriculum here at school, and that they really wanted to see changes in that area. And so how we will measure progress, I think one of the most important ways is by listening to them and making sure that we're reflecting on what they tell us and making changes based on it. That is a big takeaway from that particular student panel. The other thing we mentioned was our plan to engage parents, and we do have a parent proposal to create an equity council that would have parents as representatives on each of the school buildings' equity leadership teams. So we are meeting with parents, Candace and I are meeting with parents next week to talk about the next steps for that proposal. And we're continuing with our English class, because that has become a really important way for families to connect with the school district. And I think the families would be significantly disappointed if we didn't continue with that. That means a lot to them. Next one. The next thing we said we would do would be to continue to create our cycles of learning and reflection. So our equity leadership teams at each building are planning professional learning experiences for each in-service and oftentimes for staff meetings in between. So everybody's experiencing a certain level of learning related to what it takes to create an equitable learning environment. But then the people who have selected this pathway are continuing on with multiple other learning opportunities that take it even deeper. And on the screen, you'll see some of the books that are subjects of book studies so far this year. But the one that we're really paying real close attention to, and not only have all administrators read it, equity leadership teams have read it, and now the equity leadership teams are facilitating book studies for the next layer of staff, and that is the culturally responsive teaching and the brain. Because that is a connector piece for us with so many pieces. It talks about the steps for creating a more equitable environment for kids, but it's through social emotional learning, through understanding the brain and how to create environments that make kids ready to learn, how to form learning partnerships with students so that you can gain cognitive insight related to the needs of the student and then act upon it. So it is a key piece that brings a lot of our focus areas together and helps us make it actionable. And Shannon School was the first school to say that there is too much in this book for the traditional 8-hour book study, and that we probably need to at least double that and include opportunities for people to practice some of what Ms. Hammond is writing about related to learning projects or learning partnerships, coming back with the book study group, reflecting on it and thinking about what more they can learn. And this is another connection to our work with Heidi Gill. Heidi spoke about ensuring that we have systems in place that allow that to happen, which really gets at the importance of professional learning communities where people are regularly coming together to talk about student progress and to make adjustments based on what they learn.
So from a professional learning perspective, this past school year, Jim, Carrie, and I have been attending a multi-part sort of ongoing professional learning through ASA, which stands for Association of Wisconsin School Administrators. So it's like the state organization basically for principals. They have really great professional development for us. And so we've been attending sessions with other administrators from around the state, learning about this process of equity audits, which are rooted in the work of Colleen Capper from UW-Madison and Elise Ventura, who's at UW-Milwaukee in the Ed Leadership Program. They've published quite extensively on this project, and anyone who gets a principal license at either of those two institutions goes through this process. But it's basically taking an incredibly deep, like 75-page dig into all of your data, both at your building and your district. And it was kind of exciting because the first session really talked about why is this important? And I felt like we were way ahead of everybody else with all the work that we have been doing about the why behind looking at our data and what's equitable within our district. Then the next step is really going deep into your data. And another piece I feel like that we've been ahead of other districts is the work that we've been doing in our goal reports the last number of years since I've been in the district, and that we don't just look at how students are doing on the Ford exam or the state report card, but that every single administrator in this room is disaggregating that data. And we know that we have opportunity gaps within our data where our students with disabilities don't perform as well as our students with disabilities. Our students of color don't perform as well as our white students. I mean, we've already talked about these things, but we've already been doing that. But the equity audit asked us to go even a little bit deeper, like looking at things like when you look at your science department, how many of your science teachers are male versus female? Because in most schools, they're predominantly male. Most school boards are predominantly male. So they asked us, ours is good. But we're also a very white school board. We're a very white staff. And so I have 2 people of color on my staff of 90. That's disproportionate for the number of students of color that I have. And I know Gina and Mike have been making lots of steps of trying to help our hiring be more diverse. It asks questions like, do you have an all-gender bathroom? Well, now at the middle school we do. So it isn't just asking about data, but it's asking all of these questions that help you to really think about your school from a lens of gender, sexual orientation, race, socioeconomic, disability, like all these different facets, and then it overlaps them. So you're looking at what percentage of your students with disabilities are also qualified for free and reduced lunch. and is that proportionate to your student population? And then sort of the third step of the process is like, what are you going to do about it? And Colleen and Elise really look at systems within schools, and really are proponents of kids being with their regular ed peers in an inclusive environment, and not having pull-out services. So there's a lot of things with structures that you start to look at, and we still have more sessions this year, and we're hoping to take that information that we learn and bring it back, obviously, to our buildings and to our equity teams, and share that data and start developing plans to address some of those inequities.
And to administrator workshop.
Yes.
And the last thing that you have up there is the Dane County project. And so we meet monthly with a group of Dane County school districts who are also working with Heidi Gill. She's there sometimes, and sometimes the sessions are led by equity coordinators from other districts. And we are, as a Dane County group, learning together. Each time we meet, there's a portion of time that is spent on learning and discussing what is current for the group. And then there is a part of time where we split up into 4 different subcommittees. One of them is on data and looking at what data is privileged to be looked at and what should we be looking at. One group is looking at engagement of students. So they are looking as a county at how we can include that student voice. And there's a 100 student conference being planned right now for April, and so we'll have a number of our students that will be invited to attend that conference. The third subcommittee is a superintendent board committee, and there's a group that's planning how to bring some of this information to the Dane County school boards so that you all can learn together as with your partners in the county. And then the fourth group is looking at equity and discipline. So we'll be looking at discipline policies and procedures across the Dane County area as well, and looking at what is the impact of those policies on our students in terms of suspensions, expulsions, that kind of thing. So we are continuing that work with the Dane County group, and we're hoping that you'll be able to participate in something later this summer that the group puts together for you. And we'll just open it up to questions now.
Any board member have any questions? Courtney? Troy? Dan?
Something that I'm always concerned with. I think it's great what we're doing as a district and what you're leading in this area, and thank you for that. Is there any movement or hope of recruiting staff of different ethnicities? Is there any movement in that area? I know we haven't had a lot of luck in the past. Are we trying anything new? Is there anything that we can do?
So that's a great question. We have been working very diligently the last 2 years to do this. We now partner with the Urban League, and we are a featured employer for them. So we get priority access to applicants. In addition to that, Mike and I teach part of a class on interviewing with them. They have a paraprofessional and support staff class that they teach. And then as part of that, we interview after. And so we have been successful in increasing our percentage of staff of color in terms of support staff, partially through that, and then also through targeted efforts and referrals. In terms of teaching staff, that has been a little bit more difficult. Part of our challenge is that the pool is just smaller in terms that we're all competing for the same candidates. Some of the schools have had job fairs specific for increasing the diversity of the applicant pool, such as UW-Milwaukee and UW-Madison, and so we attend those as well. Our challenge has been, in my opinion, having people want to be in Oregon as opposed to a more urban environment. This year we did start advertising in there's a magazine publication called Minority Teacher that targets educators of color, and so we started to advertise there. And we're also looking to work with Middleton and Madison on strategies to increase enticing people of color to want to live in the Madison area. So it's something that we think about a lot and are working very hard on, but it has been challenging.
Thanks.
Krista? Tim? Herb? Great, thanks for the report, you guys. Keep up the good work. That takes us to item F, 5-year budget plan. Andy, I think that's you. Wild guess. Yeah.
Thank you. I have some, just in case you wanted the color copies to kind of peruse, I made some copies today and put some page numbers on it, just in case there's questions or anything that you want to refer to. Thought I'd start with something that Mr. Roffers said when he put together his revenue or his projections, and that is, I guarantee you that the numbers we're going to talk about are wrong. But we have to start someplace, and so this is obviously a projection. We took Mr. Roffers' projections for enrollment, and as I've talked about this report in the past, it talks about it being a plan, but to some degree it's really more of a projection. School district finances are dictated almost 90% based on what our enrollment is, and that enrollment can be a couple different types of enrollment. It could be open enrollment, as we talked a little bit about earlier this evening, as well as resident enrollment. The Roffers report specifically talked about resident enrollment, and so that's where we'll spend a little bit of time talking. You see on the bottom of page 1 that we put the kind of a paste basically right from Roffers' report. And what's important here is kind of those target years, the 2021, 25, 26, and 30, 31. Obviously, for the most part, what we're focusing here is on the 2021 projection, because that's just around the corner for us. So on page 2, we talk a little bit about how we utilize those in a 3-year averaging component. You see part of our revenue limit formula right from DPI's worksheet that we've kind of pasted in here to kind of show you how that all works, and show you that for 2019, September, third Friday in September 2019, we're projecting a total FTE, including summer school, of about 39 as far as our FTE. And we're going to kind of walk you through and what that means from a money perspective for next year. And then we take and extrapolate the numbers out to get to 2021, and there's a little bit of a jump there in order to get there. Before we get there, though, I want to talk a little bit about the money and how that works in this. We did take some assumptions. I think they're realistic assumptions. They're not too aggressive and they're not too conservative. And I want to just point that out a little bit. The one thing is in the state budget, the two-year budget that we're in right now, there was an allocation per student for a categorical aid that went up to $654. But for the state, they have to try to balance budgets, and so they then projected the next number for 2019-20 to go down to $630. What we're using in our projections is keeping it at $654. We think that's a realistic expectation, and we think the reason that the legislature did that was for their own budgeting purposes. We think it's realistic to assume that $20-some difference will be made up, $24 difference will be made up either within the revenue limit or it will be held constant at the $654. But that is an assumption on our part. Second of all, we took a stab in the dark a little bit, not totally in the dark. We've been hearing things at the legislative level. This Thursday, Mr. Evers, the Governor Evers, is going to be giving his his state budget. We are using $150 per student. Obviously, regardless of what Governor Evers puts out there on Thursday, there is a huge process that we'll have to go through with the legislature in order to nail that number down. But we are using 150 as a number at this point in time. So those two assumptions are not overly optimistic and not overly conservative, but they're built into the dollar amounts that were here. On page 3, we talk a little bit, we basically take the Roffers report and we kind of blend it over the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, so that people can get a feel. Obviously, a significant jump in 2021 as we hit the number that's in the Roffers report. You see us going from 3887 as a projection this next year to 4584 in 1 year. So I would say that might be a little bit too optimistic, and I don't know that we'd actually want that number to happen because of the impact that it would have on our operations, as well as tax rate, which I'll mention here in a second. Going to page 4, or should I take a breather? Anybody have any questions as we've kind of gone through this? I know I'm going fast. Okay, page 4 is open enrollment. For the most part, not an issue here as far as the projected impact. We are looking at about a $32,000 increase net for this next year. We feel that that's realistic. Last year, I think our net actually was stagnant, or it might have even went down a touch. So open enrollment has not been something that we've been actively utilizing, as the buildings have been full over the last several years. So we've not really been targeting open enrollment as a revenue generator for us. Page 5, I kind of cut this right in half in my own mind. There's a lot of columns, so that helps us kind of work through this. But I wanted to kind of show, again, this is a very high level, 50,000 square elevation as far as a look at our school district finances. We're not getting into every little nook and cranny of things, but just what kind of drives our budget, and which is the enrollment component. The first column is our September 3rd Friday count. That you see there after you see the description of what each of these things are. And you can see that our revenue basically brought in about $43.5 million. Then we take and we look at our January count, which is just a few weeks ago, third Friday numbers, and we project those forward. So in other words, kindergartners become first graders become second graders, etc. And what would that do? What would that impact be? Again, with the same assumptions of $150 increase in the revenue limit or in the per pupil aid, but in this instance we're using the revenue limit. That looks like about an $860,000 increase. Again, we're trying to anticipate some growth in our school district based on the Roffers report, and show we're using about a 99 student FTE increase. However, that's actually, if you look at the roll-up, it's a little bit more than that because our senior class is a fairly decent size. So realistically, we're talking about 100 and, oh shoot, I've lost it. I think it's around 140 or 150 student increase in order to get to that number. So that is what we've been using kind of preliminary as far as budgeting for this next year, is about a $1.4 million revenue limit or revenue increase overall in the district, including the open enrollment. And then as we go across this line, now we kind of go into what would happen if Roffer's numbers were right on, which he admitted they weren't. But that would mean an increase of 692 students. And you see some fairly large increases in revenue that would be coming our way. Keep in mind that 692 students is going to come with a significant amount of expenses. And so that is going to have a balance in how that all works out. And the three-year averaging takes a little while for that to kind of work through. And you see that actually 3 years out, you're looking at almost a $7 million increase in revenue. Keep in mind that this is probably not something we would even want to hope for to some degree, because the impact on the tax rate in the first year that this type of an increase happens is fairly impactful, because what happens is, the assessed value, if we're growing that fast, will probably trail a year. Our assessed values are determined in January. So if we had a bunch of homes that opened up in the summer, those assessed values, we don't even get to account for another year. So you're not going to take that revenue limit authority that you have and spread that over that assessed value for an entire year. Compound that with state aids, not all, based on those kids until a following year as well. And so the impact that we would have if we grow that fast would have a significant feel to it that first year that we levy. So it's better to kind of grow slowly so that impact is kind of distributed over the assessed value kind of as it grows, as well as the state aid. So then you can kind of see how that works out. The 20% numbers is basically how we try to distribute that growth. That's what's in the heading for those years 3, 4, and 5. Going to page 5, you kind of say, okay, what would be two more, what would be the two paths here? More realistic might be a 300 student increase for 2020, 2021, which is again 2 years out. And so you can kind of compare those numbers a little bit. Obviously, the averaging is having an impact here over those numbers, but more of a $3.4 million impact is probably more realistic as the Terra Vista subdivision starts to build out a little bit, and other areas in Oregon as well. So kind of just a comparison to where Roffers was to maybe a more realistic expectation of 300 that second year out. And then we start talking a little bit about expenses. Again, this is a very high level. We're not getting down into line items or anything, but just kind of looking at what would happen for this next year and what kind of money we think it will cost to have a salary step increase for the teachers, as well as a salary increase for all the rest of the staff. That's based on a 2.44%, which is the CPI that was certified by WERC, and then a health insurance increase of up to 4%, which is just a little over $250,000. We don't know that 4% is for sure. We will be actually starting to meet with them actually tomorrow to some degree, and over the next couple weeks to kind of nail that number down from there. So didn't really do the math for you on the piece of paper, but to do it kind of for you in our heads here, we're looking at about 1.4 potential increase in revenue, and expenses, before we even start looking at new positions, of about 1.24. So about $160,000 is kind of the delta there that we would have to start talking about new positions, which will feed into our next board meeting when we start talking about staffing. Any questions?
Barb, Tim, or Krista, anything? Left side, Dan or Troy or Courtney? No. Dan?
Yeah, thanks. Have you started looking at how staffing in the new school is going to impact these budgets over the next 5 years?
Sure. So keep in mind that we do have the $2.1 million override that goes into place the second year. So that's not included in these revenue projections at this point in time. And of that 2.1, 400,000 goes to the long-term capital maintenance plan. So we really have about $1.7 million to work with. We did have a number of teaching positions in there. We have all the associated fixed costs associated with opening the building. So that's there for us when the building opens. I think the major question, and we are talking about this, we actually spent some time talking about it today, is how fast do we grow? Okay, which is kind of what's in here, but also how do we fill that building? And where do those kids come from? What are the remaining populations left in the schools that we have? And how do we manage that? What are the transportation boundaries? How does that all work? Those are all fairly detailed, complicated questions that we're just starting to ponder and starting to think about processes and how to work through. So, yes, have we started talking about it? Do we have absolutely? Do we have all the answers worked out? Absolutely not. It's just the start of that.
So, what you're saying is you think that we've, as far as the referendum goes, the money that we've got to run the school is basically going to even out. These budget projections are close to it. It's not going to throw them way off.
No, it shouldn't throw them way off. Regardless of what happens as far as enrollment growth, we have the revenue associated with the override that the constituents approved that will allow us to open that building without any significant issues. Other than ramping up and opening a building is a process that creates some hurdles and challenges in and of itself. It also creates some opportunities for us to work through. So I'm not overly worried about the second year. I'm more worried about whether the growth happens as we've shown it's supposed to happen, and as Mark has looked at the populations and confirmed his numbers. It's just when it happens and how do we manage that.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Tim.
In the Roffers report, did Mark get into at all where he anticipated those neighborhoods would be this spring?
No, he did these kind of target dates. So he did 2021, and then he picked 5 years out, and then another 5 years out.
Okay.
So that's why my report uses those same numbers.
So there's no real progress report as to how it's looking.
I would say that I think Dr. Bergstrom has talked to him, and he has kind of circled back to all of his contacts when he was putting the report together, and has confirmed that these numbers will happen. I think they're just a little bit behind where he thought as far as a timeline.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Thanks, Andy. That really gives us a good prelude into our staffing discussions and our budget discussions and prioritizations. I know before we commenced our meeting tonight, we had a staffing task force meeting, the last of the three, and I'm going to ask Troy and Tim, because I was gone for the last part of it, probably have you kind of lead the first 15, 20 minutes of discussion, kind of to summarize for the board what we've learned, but we can talk about that more. So I'd like for you guys to take the lead and kind of catch us all up to speed a little bit on that. It was really a valuable 3 sessions that we had. So we'll get that information. We have the budgetary information, and we're going to get the information from the administration on staffing, so that begins our prioritization for our budget for the next year. Kind of the plan in place, and we're early. We used to be having this conversation a couple months later, and so we've got some time to see how things play out a little bit. But that's the overall agenda. Any questions about how we're going to proceed that way? Okay. Sorry to dump that on you guys, but better you than me right now. Okay. Thanks, Andy. Brian, just a quick report on what we've got planned in April.
Sure, I can. Would you like me to take the next 2 items?
Yep, and then we'll circle back to Beacon.
Okay. School leadership team reports. Board members, remember that is work that we did with all of our school leadership teams right here in the Innovation Center, along with Dr. Rickabaugh. We held our first session last May, and then our second session in June. And we got ahead of that May rush this year, and we scheduled Monday, April 15th, and Monday, April 29th. Again, a similar format. We'll get an update from our school leadership teams on the progress that they have made this particular school year, and maybe a little snapshot of the picture into the future. One of the things we learned from our 5 Levers initiative almost 18 months ago, our colleagues, our staff members, really enjoyed hearing from one another in terms of what was a success or what was an opportunity that they tried in one of their buildings, and it had some super positive spillover effects on the other buildings. So we're looking forward to that again. Then jumping into the superintendent's report, this will be a little shorter than usual. You've heard a lot from me tonight, but I just want to underscore a big priority and a bold plan that the board approved a number of years ago, and it's regarding our teacher compensation plan. I trust that you find as much joy and pride in that as I do. That was a challenge when we started. We knew we had some challenging financial times ahead to allocate that $3 million to make our teacher compensation plan as strong as it can be. And my 2 colleagues that I worked closely with that Gina and Andy, I can tell you they worry a lot more than I do. They probably worried enough for all three of us if we averaged it out. But the beauty is we landed that plane with our teacher compensation plan, and we have lived up to 100% of the responsibilities that we shared with the community and that we shared with our staff. And that was a big, bold initiative, and it feels really good that we've accomplished it. That doesn't mean we're finished, because as long as we are a school district, we will need a competitive teacher compensation plan to retain and attract teachers over the years, and especially so in a district that's growing like we are. There are a number of positions included in the $2.1 million, and today Andy did a really good job of reminding me, don't forget part of that $2.1 million is $400,000 for our capital projects. So that will come online with the 2021 school district, which will help us from a funding standpoint in terms of making sure that we have all the positions we want. And to Steve's point, we are a bit ahead. Last year we had a conversation and you all asked that we provide you with more information a bit earlier. So on the March 11th board meeting, we will have our first draft of the staffing plan for the 2021 or the 2019-20 school district. And then ultimately we'd like to get your approval of that plan the first meeting in April. Second item on my list, we have two national merit finalists, Julie Bull and Marissa Zintel. Some of you might recall a long time ago, Julie's father, Fred Bull, was a parent representative on our original Vision Steering Committee. So that's tonight's fun fact for you. Last Wednesday, there was no one happier than Mr. Pliner, because we were able to get the ACT day in without a snow day, even though the weather was knocking on our door and districts across the state had the ACT day last Wednesday. Additionally, Jim shared with me that our OHS mock trial team earned a first place finish recently at the regional competition, and I have a feeling Steve is going to share something about our theater program this weekend, so I won't steal his thunder. This past Friday, and I'm pleased to see Shannon here on Monday, she made it to the annual Upham Woods environmental experience with Oregon Middle School students, and I know that went exceptionally well. And if you have nothing to do this Thursday night at Prairie View in Brooklyn, there is dinner and a book. It is a wonderful opportunity to connect with parents and, of course, our students at both Prairie View and Brooklyn. And I think the start time is about the same. I'm looking at my Prairie View. Yes, I can read that on your hand. It is a 5 o'clock start. So if you haven't had the opportunity to see that, I can tell you both schools will be jam-packed with people, with parents, in some cases grandparents as well, and filled with young people as well. That is a great program for us. So I will stop with that and see if you have any questions.
Thanks, Brian. Seeing no questions, Becken, how are things going at the high school?
Hello. Fabulous. So, like he said, the play was this weekend, and I saw you there. It was really, really great. The kids did an awesome job. And, yeah, more social things. The mock trial, I have a friend who's there. They got first place. That was really exciting. Sports, I guess, the girls are out. Sadly, boys have their first playoff game this weekend. Wrestling was out. And then academically, I would say we're definitely settled into second semester by now. And for seniors, a lot of us have either finished our e-portfolios from first semester, which I know a lot of you were involved in, or are starting our portfolios for the end of the year. And so that's kind of an exciting time to look forward to. Scholarships and everything are starting up. Yeah, so if you have any questions, I'm sure I can answer them, but that's just kind of an overview, I guess. Is that all right? Okay.
There's a rumor that we're just going to make you seniors kind of keep going to school because of all the snow days, right?
Oh,
No.
Maybe not.
I guess that's an opinion, Mr. Feiner. We're going to have to let the seniors end on graduation day.
Very grateful, thank you.
Yeah. And we're still working through issues related to the snow days, and weather doesn't seem to be getting any better, does it? Not at all. Okay. That takes us into closing the future agenda. We only have one March meeting. The second meeting's during break time. We are going to start at 6 o'clock on that meeting to do a committee of the whole to discuss a couple issues related to the school resource officer. So we start that meeting at 6 o'clock and then our regular meeting at 6:30. Okay? So, and I don't have an agenda, but do you have things that, you know, we're going to have the staffing task force?
Yeah, the two big items will be staffing task force, and then we'll be sharing information in terms of our plans, keep our fingers crossed, of school snow day makeup.
Great. All right. Check out Courtney, Troy, Dan, Barb, Tim. Okay. I've got two things. One is I saw Becken at You Can't Take It With You, which was the theater production that Mike Doucette directed with the help of a lot of people. It was a terrific show. It's a great play. It was performed in 1975 initially at Oregon High School. And I was Mr. DePina, so if you had seen the show, Mr. DePina comes out of the basement where he's making fireworks in a toga, scantily clad. So, you know, I think there might be pictures of that back in 1975 of me in a toga. Yeah, it was back scandal. But it's really, you know, we talked about co-curriculars and stuff, and we get a lot of focus on sports, but the arts and the theater programs are doing such a great job here, and there were a lot of kids involved, both on stage and backstage. The number of kids working tech and being stagehands was really terrific. It was really well attended too. They had good attendance, notwithstanding the weather. The second thing I want to mention is that goes back to the 70s as well. For me, Coach Roger Pribanow has been nominated and selected to be chosen for the Wisconsin Basketball Coaches Hall of Fame. Long time coach in Oregon High School for boys and girls basketball, girls tennis, a lot of things. He was a teacher here in the Oregon School District for over 36 years. He was a phenomenal math teacher. I had him for geometry. A great coach, a great supporter of Oregon. The fact that he's now getting into the Wisconsin Basketball Coaches Association Hall of Fame is long overdue, and a tremendous honor for him as a person, but to us as a school district to have him inducted. So that's really terrific news. Still see Roger around on a regular basis. He comes to, I think, every sporting event around that goes on. So still living and breathing Oregon sports in the school district. So congratulations, Roger. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and we'll convene at 8:15 for a closed session. We'll adjourn out of closed session. We'll not be coming into open session. So thanks, everyone.